The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank God. Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I am the token Jew with an I, Ralph Tyko. And I'm a little down today. The great immortal Bill Russell has passed. And I have Alan Blumkin, the all-time maven of mavens, on the line, my good friend. Alan, how are you?
Hanging in there.
Yeah, this is a tough one. We were going to talk about Casey Stengel today, and we will shortly, but let's start with the iconic one. And I will tell you that he went to McClymonds High School, right down the road from me in Oakland. I'm in Alameda, California. Maybe 2 miles away is McClymonds. And that is an iconic high school, let alone anything else. McClymonds had Vada Pinson, Frank Robinson, and Kurt Flood playing in the same outfield at one time. Not for long, but they all played there. And as a matter of fact, Frank Robinson beat out Russell on the high school basketball team. So that's how good Frank Robinson was, and that's how much Bill Russell developed after college and when he went into the pros. He didn't take to the game naturally, even though he was a 7-footer. So let me turn it over to Al, and he'll talk about the immortal Bill Russell.
Okay, first of all, Ralph, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And Russell was 6'9" or 6'10".
Right.
And he was a killer. He went to the University of San Francisco and played on 2 straight NCAA tournaments. Won two NCAA titles. Nobody ever heard of San Francisco as a basketball power before him. And he just took over games. And, of course, in those days there was no clock. Then what happened, and he was drafted originally by the St. Louis Hawks. But it was made clear before the draft that St. Louis was a very highly segregated city at that point. This is in 1956. And he made it clear that he didn't want to play there. So the owner of the Hawks, Ben Kerner, got together with Red Auerbach, who's, the Celtic guru, and they worked out a trade. They got the draft rights to Bill Russell, and the Celtics gave up Cliff Hagan, who turned out to be a pretty good ball player, but was sitting on the bench for the Celtics, and Ed McCauley, who was a Easy Ed McCauley, who was a Celtic stalwart for a number of years, but he was from St. Louis. He played for St. Louis University, and he had a child that was ill at the time, so he wanted to go back home. So they worked out the deal, and Russell, before he went into the NBA, he went to play basketball in the Olympics. That was one of the conditions he made. The Olympics that year were held in Melbourne, Australia. So he played in the Olympics. He won a gold medal there. And then about a third of the way through the season, he came to the Celtics and immediately turned them from a mediocre team who had never won anything before he showed up into what would be the greatest dynasty, one of the greatest dynasties in the history of sports, maybe the greatest. He was there for he revolutionized defense. The Celtic fast break came because of him. And in his 13 years there, he won 11 titles. He lost one in second year in 1958 because he was hurt, and they lost to the Hawks, and then they got eliminated by the Sixers in the conference final in 1967. But outside of that, every year, he was just totally dominant, and probably the greatest winner ever in professional sports.
Now, that people ask, who is the greatest center of all time? And Bill Russell individually certainly wasn't that, but he was the greatest center teammate that ever lived. Can you imagine winning all those titles? And NBA had some deep. They only had 8 teams at the time, and they had some deep teams. And you mentioned St. Louis. That was only one. The Warriors were pretty good for a long time. The team that wasn't very good in Russell's era was the New York Knicks. And if you don't mind, Al, I will tell you an anecdote that you've heard from me at least 5 times in the 5 years that we've been doing this. But I was a kid growing up in New York and an autograph hound. And we kids would go down to the hotels. In this case, it was either the Biltmore or the Roosevelt, where the visiting players, hockey players, basketball players, I don't think the football team stayed there, but I remember going down and falling into step with Bill Russell and Wayne Embry on the five-block walk to Madison Square Garden. And Bill Russell literally never signed autographs, even for his own teammates. It was reputed. And I get to talking to him. He goes, no autographs, no autographs. And I say, I know you're in a hurry to get to the Garden because the tradition was, and whenever he had a big game at the Garden, he'd be nervous and he would throw up before the game. So I said, Bill, I know you're in a hurry, but you could relax a little today because Charlie Tyree is the center, and you don't even have to get sick. And he gives me a cackle that I will never forget, that Bill Russell cackle. And he says, he takes whatever I had, and what I had was a picture from Sport magazine of him going up against Dolph Schayes. And he says, I'll sign it. And I had the guts to say, to Ralph, best wishes. And he actually wrote to Ralph, Bill Russell. And I've got that autograph, that picture, decoupaged, and I'll put a picture up on YouTube, decoupaged. To this day, I keep it. And it means more to me that I made him laugh than it means that I got the autograph. Because I come to find out that it's just a piece of paper, you know, autographs. And the true meaning is of it all is to have a personal interaction with whoever you're talking to, whether they sign or not, whether you ask them for an autograph or not. And in my case, I got to live out my dreams by having a bunch of people talk to me. through the podcast. So rest in peace, Bill. You were tremendous. And Wayne Embry, incidentally, was an old Cincinnati...
Royal, played with Oscar and Lucas, yeah.
Right. When he got old, and this is something that enhanced the Boston Celtics, they would, Red Auerbach would always bring in a veteran. I remember Carl Braun was with them for a while at the end of his career, a guy who could come off the bench and give you a few good minutes and be a positive influence to young players.
One of the ultimates he had with that was Bailey Howell.
Right.
Who was known as the garbage man because that's what he did. He stood by the basket and would take off shots or rebounds, and just put it back up. But yeah, you're right. He did that Auerbach did that quite a few times.
And he had an incredibly well-balanced lineup.
Yeah.
Not only were the forwards strong, the guards. Imagine a team with guards, Frank Ramsey.
Frank Ramsey. Yeah.
He had the Jones boys and Frank Ramsey backing up Cousy and Sharman initially. 5 guys in the backcourt who you consider to be very, very good. Sam Jones was one of the most underrated players in
I know
history.
that. He passed away last year, and I put out on one of the basketball groups on Facebook how great he was.
Yes, he was. And how many...
And clutch.
How we were
clutch.
We were talking off the air, and this is the day we're recording this on the day after Bill Russell passed. We have lost, starting with Aaron and Seaver and those guys, recently an incredible number of icons. And the older I get, this is my penance for living this long.
So you got Whitey Ford, Bob Gibson, Lou Brock.
All these guys, we have personal memories of where we were
we
when
grew
they
up
played.
With them.
Right. I watched Lou Brock.
Yeah.
I watched Lou Brock hit a home run into the center field bleachers the day that Marv Throneberry missed first and second base on a triple. And
Brock was with the Cubs when that happened, right?
And Brock was with the Cubs, and he was a little skinny guy. And he, just quick wrist or whatever it was, one of like 5 people to hit a ball into the bleachers in the Polo Grounds. Adcock was one. Do you remember the others?
Henry Aaron was the only other one.
Okay,
and Henry Aaron and Brock did it against the Mets, who were there for 2 years. The Giants were there from 1891 through 1957, and Adcock was the only one who did it when they were there.
Well, that's indicative of the Met pitching, and if anybody is old enough to remember those first 2 years, the first year of being a Met fan, it was kind of cute, kind of nice. They lost a lot. They had a bunch of guys, Hodges and Gus Bell and what have you, turned out.
Thomas, yeah.
Right. But the second year was incredibly frustrating for a young kid who grew up in the city.
30 times that season.
In the second year?
Second year, yeah.
Well, yeah. And they made, and I've said this on the air before, they made the second worst trade of their history. Maybe getting rid of Amos Otis later on, and that could have been good. Paul Blair, but I'm referring to Nolan Ryan being the first worst trade.
That was after 1971.
Right, but Fugazi was a horrible deal. but they gave up, the Mets did, Bob Miller, righty Bob Miller, who was a pretty damn good relief pitcher for a lot of years and helped the Dodgers tremendously. And I remember distinctly the guys they got, Burright and Harkness.
Yeah. And Bob Miller was a reliever on the 1971 World Champion Pirates.
Right, 9 years later.
Yeah.
So talk about your bad deals. Let's get to Casey.
Okay. Just one more thing. Yesterday, the Yankee game got out of hand, and the Mets were playing at night, so I put on the Met channel, and they were showing a replaying from opening day this year, the unveiling of the Tom Seaver statue
right
in front of Citi Field, and they had his wife Nancy and his two daughters and one of his grandkids there. It was very, very moving. Yeah.
Yeah. No matter.
I was present at Shea Stadium when they retired Seaver's number in 1988, and I was at Yankee Stadium in August 1985 with a whole bunch of friends when Seaver won his 300th game with the White Sox.
Yeah, we have indelible memories with all these guys, and they reach the surface when these guys pass away. I find every one of the losses, not just the major stars.
Yeah.
A utility
some of the people we
got,
did podcasts with Ralph Terry and Irv Noren, and we have that down for posterity, basically.
Absolutely, and they were also mentioned. Those two guys were also mentioned along with you. You play a big part in the book that I wrote, the first book that I wrote.
Yeah.
And I wrote it with George Grimm. It's called Comfortably Zoned in a Vat of Pine Tar. And I think it was great.
Because I know these guys, like the back of my hand. With the players, I look at the Yankees are playing Kansas City today. I know a few of these players because I've seen them for the last couple of days. But in the field, when they came in, I recognized one name in the lineup. You can't keep up with this stuff anymore.
No, and
it's not worth
I mentioned George Grimm a few years ago. I mentioned George Grimm, who's a hockey writer who wrote the book with me, and he was talking about the original six and how it's expanded to 30 teams. Yeah. And he's written 2 hockey books. He keeps up with it, and he can't name all 30 teams, let alone, he said he knew every player, as we did, on every team back then.
Back then there was 16 baseball teams, 12 football teams, 8 NBA teams, and 6 hockey teams.
Yeah.
That's impossible. I've lost so much interest in hockey. I couldn't tell you the name of more than 5 players in hockey right now.
I will send you some podcasts that I recently did with George, and one of the guests we had was Craig Patrick. And
I know the name. I know the family name. Yeah.
The family name, it evokes so many memories growing up as a kid.
So I used to follow it when there were 6 teams. I followed it until about the mid-'80s, and what caused me to stop was the Islanders were in the process of clinching one of their 4 Stanley Cups, and the final game was they're playing Philadelphia, and the final game was very one-sided, and one of the Philadelphia goons started a fight for no reason.
Right.
No
Remember
reason.
The old joke? I went to a fight last night, and a hockey game broke out. It was
But that's why I'm in so many groups on Facebook that deal with the old days.
Yes. The old days are great memories, and I like to think that we contribute to keeping those memories alive for a lot of people. It makes me damn right proud. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, you want to start on Casey?
Yes, please,
okay.
If you would.
I got very interested in Casey Stengel, obviously in the early 50s when I started following the Yankees. And he's become, along with Yogi Berra and Satchel Paige, the three most quoted baseball people of the 20th century. Casey had an incredible, varied life. There are two excellent biographies of him. One is by Robert Creamer. It's called Stengel. And one by Marty Appel that came out a few years ago called Baseball's Most Unforgettable Character. And there's a book that I have which is hysterical. It's called The Gospel According to Casey. It gives a whole bunch of his famous quotes and gives the background for them. It's absolutely hysterical.
Okay, let me just say that Casey, Yogi, those guys, they had incredible quotes. They were this and that, but they were great players and managers. So it wasn't just what you're talking about. Isn't just his life as a comic or whatever. Casey Stengel, when he managed between 1949 and 1953, when they won 5 championships in a row, he did it at a time, and this is the thing I respect most about any manager, any dynasty. He started out having Joe DiMaggio as his center fielder and lived through his retirement, and Mickey Mantle became his center fielder. And he was able to deal with that. He was able to deal with a changing generation, guys like Billy Martin, Whitey Ford, and Mickey Mantle weren't used to it. Wasn't like the old days. It wasn't like a Yankee clubhouse. It was fun and enjoyable. And Casey was able to adapt to that. And I really give him most credit in his career for doing that. That 5-year dynasty was unbelievable.
Well, that's why I grew up following. I started following it to a little extent in 1951, and the first year I really followed fully was 1952. You know, he had a fairly decent playing career. He played with the Dodgers, the Pirates, the Phillies, the Giants, and the Braves. Played 14 years, and he came up to the Dodgers in 1912. He got 4 hits in his first game, and he made a quote after this: "Is they thought I was another Ty Cobb. It took me 1 or 2 days to prove they were wrong." And then, of course, the big thing with the Dodgers was when he was traded to the Pirates. He came back and he had a injured sparrow, and found an injured sparrow in Ebbets Field. He put it under his cap, and when he came up, he came up here. He took the cap off, and the bird flew out.
Right.
And after his, he did play a couple of World Series against the Yankees, and one of them he won a game with the Giants. He won a game by hitting an inside the park home run.
Hey, speaking of quotes and this is about Stengel, it was Warren Spahn who played for him with the Boston Braves, and they weren't very good at the time. and Warren Spahn again played with him with the 65 Mets, and Yogi Berra and him, made up the oldest battery.
Hall of Fame battery.
His Hall of Fame battery.
Yeah, and
and what did he say? What did Spahn say, Alan?
Spahn said, I played for Stengel before and after. He was a genius. But Stengel, after that, he managed in the minor leagues for several years, and then got the job with the Dodgers. And the Dodgers in the 30s were a perennial sixth-place team. So he was there for 3 years. They fired him after 1936. They had to pay him for 1937. And because they had to pay the 1 year, and O'Malley saw that, and O'Malley swore after that, when he took control of the Dodgers, that he'd never sign any manager to more than a 1 year contract, which he kept up to. Casey then went on to manage the Braves, and there's one particular writer drunk on the Boston Herald by the name of Dave Egan, and Egan, when Stengel was hit, Casey was hit by a cab in 1942, got his leg broken. Dave Egan put
most valuable player.
Yeah, he named the cab. He did the most for Boston baseball that year. So after Casey left the Braves, where he had, the teams were pretty bad there also, he went to Milwaukee and managed the Milwaukee Brewers American Association team, which was owned at that point by Bill Veeck.
Veeck is in Wreck.
Veeck loved Casey, and because Casey, in those days, a lot of minor league teams were independently operated, and they made their money by selling players to the major leagues. And Casey Stengel told Veeck once, Veeck had this in Veeck is in Wreck. He says, I'm going to sell this catcher who can't do anything but throw to the scout for the A's, because this guy's in love with catchers with arms. So he wound up playing this guy a couple of times. He made a couple of throws, and Casey wound up selling the guy getting the guy sold to the A's for 2 or 3 times what he was worth. So Casey,
he was slick. In 1949, he managed in Oakland.
48. That was 48, the year before he came there.
He had Jackie Jensen.
Yeah.
And Billy Martin.
Yeah.
And it was incredible how they all reached the majors virtually at the same time. Billy Martin was a year after Casey became manager of the Yankees.
Yeah, he also recommended when he was out there and they won the pennant with a team that wasn't supposed to, he recommended that when he was hired by the Yankees, he recommended that they purchase Gene Woodling from San Francisco, who would see him, play. And they did that, and Woodling turned in, six very, very good years with the Yankees. And I did a whole thing, a research project years ago on the hiring of Casey Stengel. And when George Weiss took over the Yankees after 1948, and he got rid of Bucky Harris because he thought Bucky Harris was too lenient. Excuse me. So he and Stengel went back to the Eastern League days in the mid-20s, where Stengel had managed after he retired as a player. And he hired Stengel, and who was regarded as a clown and an incompetent manager. And Dave Egan, the writer I mentioned before, wrote, this is the only thing that they're going to get out of Stengel is laughs, and they won't get any pennants.
Right, and little did they know, 5 in a row, 10 altogether.
Yeah, and the first 4, the first one was very difficult. they had to beat the Red Sox the last 2 days of the season in 1949 to win by a game. They were riddled by injuries. Phil Rizzuto was the only one that played almost the full schedule. Yogi missed a month with a busted thumb. DiMaggio was out half the season with an ankle problem. And they won that. Then they won in 50. They won by 3 games. In 51 by 5. And in 1952, they beat Cleveland out by 2 games. Both teams went 19-5 in the month of September. They only played each other once during that month. And then in the World Series, they won the last 2 games for a 4-3 win in Ebbets Field.
Wow. Oh, my God.
And the next year was the easy one. They won by 8.5 games. That was the changeover, basically. Rashy Reynolds and Lopak were getting old. Ford came out of the Army. And they had made regulars out of Mickey Mantle and Gil McDougald. And Billy Martin was a regular because Jerry Coleman was in the Marines. So it was a nice blend of, it's my favorite team, a nice blend of youth and age.
In 53.
And the Dodgers that year were 105-49, and probably the best overall Brooklyn Dodger team of the history. And the Yankees beat them in the World Series in 6 games because Billy Martin went absolutely nuts.
Well, he made that catch. And
that was in 52, and then he got 12 hits in 1953. They, as you said before, he was able to adjust to every situation. No play guys when they were hot, and they just had an instant. And anytime the Yankees got a player who was halfway decent from Washington, the Browns, or the A's, they turned into a superstar in New York.
Yeah.
But so he managed his biggest year in 1954. Where they won 103 games, and they finished 8 games behind the 111-win Indians, who promptly went on to get swept by the Giants in the World Series. Then they won 4 straight between 1955 and 1958. Winning World Series in 56, they got revenge over the Dodgers for 1955. In 1958, against the Braves, they got a revenge in 1957. And after 1955, when Rashy Reynolds and Lopat were all gone, he had Whitey Ford, and he had pitchers that would have 1 or 2 years and then hurt their arms or something would happen to them. And he had
like Johnny Crooks was it?
Yeah, Johnny Crooks, Tom Stuyvesant, and Bob Turley, who was the best pitcher in the American League in 1958 and won the overall Cy Young Award, was totally basically ineffective after that season. But he managed to manipulate that, and he always told players, he said, you either do it my way or you do it in Kansas City or Denver, which Kansas City was their farm team until the A's went there, and then Denver became the farm team.
I he had no hesitation. And he wasn't necessarily a player's manager.
No.
A lot of his players hated him.
But basically, the ones who hated him were the ones who played under Joe McCarthy, specifically DiMaggio and Rizzuto. Rizzuto hated him because Rizzuto wanted to try out for the Dodgers in case he was managing, and Casey saw his size and told him to go home and get a shoe shine box.
Right. And Rizzuto turns out to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, so but he played, and he took over the Yankees. He played Rizzuto every day.
Right, because he wasn't a guy who didn't recognize his mistakes.
Yeah.
I may have called him a shoe shine boy then, but I regret it, and I'm not going to punish him by not playing him Wow.
Yeah, he said that Gil McDougal once, when McDougal was going through a rough season in 1954, he says, you change that stance here or you'll be doing it in AAA.
Right. And I remember once he's sitting on the bench with Bob Cerv, and he says to Cerv casually, he says, one of us is going to be playing in Kansas City next year.
Yeah, well, Casey was from Kansas City.
Right.
That's how he got the nickname.
Casey.
He's from Kansas City, yeah.
He was going to be a left-handed dentist, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
That was his
one of the things he did, which was legendary, is he went to Congress, the House of Representatives was holding an antitrust hearing whether baseball should be put on the antitrust law. So they invite Stengel down there, and he goes on an hour ramble in Stengelese. So he finishes, and they call Mickey Mantle, and he says, Mickey, what are your views on this? He says, my views are the same as Casey's.
He sums up an hour of speech that Mickey probably wasn't paying attention to.
Yeah, and one of his other great lines was when he was taking Mickey Mantle around the outfield in Ebbets Field for the 52 World Series. And Mantle turns to him and says, you mean you played here? And Stengel says, what do you think? I was born 60 years old? And then after 1960, because the ownership wanted to get rid of him and George Weiss because they felt they were getting too old. And the Yankees didn't want to lose Ralph Houck, who was a top managerial candidate at that point. So after they blew the 1960 World Series, and Stengel came out an awful lot of criticism for starting out Ditmar in the first game instead of Whitey Ford, they fired him. So after they won 10 pennants and 7 World Series in his 12 seasons with the Yankees. So after 1961, he goes to the Mets, that were just formed.
Right. He used to call them the Knickerbockers.
Yeah.
I remember early on.
The National League, when the American League, their expansion draft, there were some decent players in that. With the National League, it was all the ones who were going to be released or farmed out or whatever. It was the contrast was that the Mets were stuck with, they took an awful lot of veterans because they wanted to capitalize on the Dodgers. They took a lot of old Dodgers. And one of the trivia things that I found out, and Ed Brasseau was at the 1998 SABR convention in San Francisco. So I went up to him and said, Mr. Brasseau, do you realize that outside of Willie Mays, you're the only former New York Giant to play for the Mets?
That's right.
And he told me he didn't know that.
Wow. Antonelli came very close. The Mets wanted Antonelli.
But he retired, yeah.
Right. He had the good sense to it, Tony.
So anyway, and since the Mets were so bad, Casey had to do the PR.
Right. And he was good at that. He could nurture the writers and keep them smiling and keep them boozed up.
And he had all sorts of tricks. He knew what players were out when they had to make a road trip to fly out early in the morning, and ones who fell asleep on the plane right away were out the night before.
Right.
So he knew all the tricks because when he was playing, he did all of them.
There's a wonderful book by Leonard Schechter, who basically wrote Ball 4. He edited it. He's credited with that. But as I know as an author, the editors and the contributors make up a book. And
called The Jocks.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I have that somewhere, yeah.
And you reminded me by that, he would talk to players on the plane Camille was one of them.
Yeah.
And he would tell him, I know what you're doing because I did it. And you can't fool me. And he was a character.
Yeah,
His best line is, when I was young, now it's not so funny to me, but I'll never make the mistake when he was fired after the 60 World Series.
Another mistake of being 70 again, yeah. But some of the Met quotes, and we'll leave it at that. Yeah, of course, the famous ones, can anybody here play this game?
Jimmy Breslin.
Yeah, Jimmy Breslin had a wonderful book out of that. At one time in spring training, the two incidents in spring training that were very funny. Once when they had separate numbered diamonds in spring training, he once said to the coaches, send us that group over to the other diamond. I want to see how they play on the road. He also said, he said, see those two guys out there? The two 20-year-olds. He says, one guy has a chance to be a very good player. The other guy has a chance to be 30. And he also hated Howard.
Memory serves, the other guy was Greg Goosen.
Goosen, yeah. He also he and Howard Cosell hated each other. So
right,
Cosell
and
wanted
he and Jackie
to interview him.
Robinson hated each other.
Yeah.
Howard Cosell would have Jackie Robinson on. He did a Mets show between game doubleheaders and this and that. And Jackie Robinson wasn't enamored with losing. And he wasn't enamored that because he was a black man, he didn't get a chance to manage. And,
the thing is with so Stengel, this is in that Stengel book. He said Cosell wanted to do a TV spot with him, so Stengel, went and he says he ticked me off right away. So I said the F-bomb to ruin the audio, and scratch my ass to ruin the video. He did not suffer fools gladly. And one of my favorite quotes was the Yankees got the Mets got Gene Woodling toward the end of the 1962 season on waivers from the expansion Washington team. Woodling was 40, and that was turned out to be his last season. So he's sitting next to Stengel in the dugout, watching the Mets blow another one, and Stengel turns to Woodling and says, "It ain't like the old days, is it?"
It certainly wasn't.
But he was, So anyway, he broke his hip in 1965 and had to retire. And I'll leave you with one last quote. He was invited to the 1966 All-Star game in St. Louis, and they had that brand new spanking second Bush Stadium that they were in from 66 to 2006. So one of the locals asked Stengel, "What do you think? What do you think of this beautiful field?" He says it holds the heat well. He passed away in 1975 at the age of 85.
Lived a life that was as interesting a life as anybody I've ever known. Alan, let me ask you a question. When Stengel retired as the manager, was forced out of the Mets, they hired Wes Westrom. Did that surprise you that they didn't hire Yogi?
No, not really, because Yogi was just coming off the, being fired as a Yankee. I don't think they want to put Yogi. Didn't want to be put in that position. He did become a Mets manager, when Bill Hodges died from a heart attack.
Right.
So
and to give my Mets a little zoom, the Mets announced Yogi's hiring at the funeral.
Yeah.
Disgraceful.
And
disregard.
Just in case you're interested, the Mets beat the hell out of Miami today.
I know, I was watching. But, Miami started to come back.
Yeah, but the Mets had a 6-0 lead after 3 innings.
Right. And as a Mets fan, you're never secure until you hear the final score.
Well, you should root for the Pirates.
I'm happy. But
a friend of mine called me up last night.
And we're talking about, this is a show about memories. You have wonderful memories being a Pirate fan.
Yeah, well, that's all it is at this point. A friend of mine called me up last night to tell me that the Pirate game was on Fox here last night. I said so. I didn't watch it because I figured they'd find out a way to lose anyway, which they did. So.
Yeah. Who'd they play? Philadelphia?
The Philadelphia Phillies, yeah.
Yeah. Philadelphia could make a difference in this pennant race.
Well, who knows? It's still a long time, and I actually watched the 2 Met-Yankee games from start to finish. It's the first time I've done that this year.
Yeah. Got to give Cashman a lot of credit. People aren't talking about him, but he built a hell of a team. He's got some speed now, and Alan Judge is just developing himself.
Yeah, they stopped playing Joey Gallo, who was absolutely horrendous.
Right.
Yeah.
And they picked up Carpenter, who's a good replacement. Benedito. I think Cashman.
Yeah, well, it should come down in the American League to them in Houston. They have problems with Houston.
Yes.
But that's a long time away. I don't like to make any predictions. And somebody said there are only 3 teams in the National League that can win anything: the Mets, the Braves, and the Dodgers.
Yeah, and I understand now that we're on current events, what's happening. Soto is going to go to either San Diego, the Dodgers, or St. Louis, and they're going to keep him out of the National League East. And
with these types, I only comment on them when thing at a trade or movement actually happens. I don't like to deal in speculation anymore.
Okay, well, I'm just saying.
So if Soto is moved, then I'll talk about it. But I generally don't like dealing. And on Facebook, I don't deal with lists. I don't deal with much commentary on current stuff. And I don't deal with comparisons.
Okay.
There are too many much out there.
It's very difficult to compare anymore unless you compare generation against generation. It's very difficult for me.
It took me a long time. Took me a long time to learn how to manage it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Alan.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
As usual, it is always with a capital my pleasure.
Okay, and give Tally a happy birthday for me.
I will.
Okay.
In a couple of days, we're going to get Chinese.
Okay.
That's the spoiler alert. Love you, Alan.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you for listening, everybody. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko. Alan Blumkin is really the heart of this network. You are tremendous, Alan, in every way. As a human, as a podcaster, and we appreciate your friendship and loyalty. Thank you again, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all. Adios.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.